It's 1:02, and we'll go ahead and get started in the interest of everyone's time. My name is Renee Martinez. I'm a Chief Housing Community Development Officer with the Harris County Community Services Department. And thank you all for joining us today. We're here to present an overview on our affordable rental housing program, community development block grant, disaster recovery funding associated with Hurricane Harvey. And this is the what we call the fourth round, and we'll be presenting today on that. Next slide, please. So I gave an overview on myself. We have multiple divisions and units in our department, including social services, transit, operations, finance. Also, we have a disaster recovery unit as well. And so with respect to Hurricane Harvey, we have taken a very significant allocation that has been awarded to the Community Services Department and have allocated that into various program areas, one of which is affordable rental housing program. What we have today are some residual funds that we are planning to deploy associated with that, approximately $13.5 million. And the intent of these funds is to deploy these into project-ready projects that can meet our various thresholds. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, it's $13.5 million approximately. And so here is the process. We released the request for applications. We sent out a link to a number of folks that were on our interested parties distribution list. Also, the request for any information associated with that is shown here. The last day for assistance is October the 14th, and the deadline for this, without fail, because we will not accept any late proposals whatsoever, is October the 20th of 2022 at 2 p.m. Next slide, please. So understanding a little bit about the Community Services Department, we focus on affordable housing, mixed income development, mixed use development. We make investments in infrastructure under our CDBG entitlement. We also make investments in infrastructure and public facilities through our CDBG disaster recovery funds. We've invested in a number of different projects. And this is all to serve low to moderate income communities in Harris County. The caveat to this, and it's a very important caveat, is the city of Houston received their own CDBG disaster recovery funding for Harvey. We do not operate inside the city limits of the city of Houston. Now, we operate in 33 other cities for the purposes of CDBG DR funding. We have operated on a limited basis inside the city when it was a homeless project and the city of Houston was making an investment. The intent of our funds in this round is to deploy very quickly into really investment-ready projects that could meet the thresholds associated with environmental review and approval through GLO, also site and neighborhood characteristics. Are the funds secured for the project? We work on a reimbursement basis. We tend to make low interest-bearing loans into a project. Sometimes we will consider what we call a performance-related loan, subject to some circumstances, say it was homeless-related. Here's various links associated with our various programs, everything from Harvey to programs that predate Harvey, the funding guidelines, etc. Next slide, please. A little bit about HUD and our CSD regulations and standards. Some of you on this call have probably worked with us on various projects, and we've referenced our affordable housing standards. They are something that we follow very closely, and anyone that is working with an architect and builder should understand that we do have to adhere very closely to our standards. Also, if there's anyone in here that may be a community housing development organization, it's a special designation under the HUD Home Program. There's a link to that. Also, the final rule established with the Home Program. For this particular round, we are not doing anything other than Harvey disaster recovery funding. Now, we have some links in here that essentially predated that into some other funding, but we are not combining any other funding source other than CDBG disaster recovery Harvey. Next slide, please. Workers provisions. These are other requirements that we build into the agreement for funding into a project. And these have all been stipulated and approved through Commissioner's Court. Also, we have tenant right provisions now that we will be including in any new project as well. So we've had an evolution with respect to various requirements that we've been building into our loan agreements. Next slide, please. So eligibility, our priority is really construction and acquisition ready projects, as we've stated, and cannot really overstate or understate the importance that we have on this. Our funding has to be deployed very quickly, and we have to get to a utilization of the funding before August of 2024. August 2024 is when our grant ends with GLO. And at that time, we have to be able in a position to have expended all funds and go into closeout. Have indicated before what our service area is, which is outside the city of Houston, and it could be in the 33 cities that exist in Harris County. We will look at the funding mix in the project. Are there quantifiable investments? And does the project have the funding to proceed? Is there any gap that it's indicating that when we go through underwriting and threshold review, we cannot determine that a project has its funding ready? We've been down this path before where we've had to pass on projects that did not have the available funding ready and be able to be delivered into the project. Next slide, please. So our eligibility criteria, consistent with the community development block grant requirements, we have a minimum of 51% of the units that have to be set aside as assisted units in the project. And we have a 20-year land use regulatory agreement that we be put in place, otherwise known as the affordability period. Eligible applicants, nonprofits, for-profits, developers, other jurisdictions, etc. Now, a little bit about for-profit developers. Our experience previously is that we started making awards into projects and then discovered through attorneys that we could not make a direct award to a for-profit entity because it would trigger a major taxable event on day one. So we started seeing some conduit entities come into play. It is very important in the proposal that is submitted and prepared that you're fully transparent about what that's going to look like. We did not receive that earlier on in some of our projects. And so that's going to be a very important point. As I said, the geography is also important. Also, the leverage that's being brought into the project is important. As I said, I mean, we're focusing outside the city. I don't know right now that the city of Houston is prepared based on where they stand with their DR funding to make any awards into projects. And so that's why we're looking at this as the Harris County service area. Next slide, please. So our priorities, shovel-ready projects. It can be single-family rental. It can be multifamily rental. You have your design and engineering plans. This is not a funding opportunity where it's going to take I don't know, 6 months to a year for design to occur. We just simply don't have that kind of time. It can be an acquisition rehab. You know, we're looking at project readiness and an ability to successfully deploy funds and to successfully have projects that will meet our requirements and our expenditure requirements with GLO. There has to be the private funding in place so that reimbursements can occur. We do not work on advancing funds. So, you know, we talk a little bit about homeless housing to the extent that this is something engaging in that. Just be very mindful of the geography that we're working in. Next slide, please. So our service area, we've elaborated on what our service area is. Also, developments must be in compliance with our multifamily and senior housing concentration policy. We do have some requirements as far as not wanting to have concentration of affordable rental projects in the county. Next slide, please. So this is our service area and some of our precinct boundaries. Our service area is there community support. That's a really big thing for us, is being able to demonstrate that there is community support behind a project that would be put into place in a particular part of the county. We also have our non-service area delineated as well. Next slide, please. So we have a slide relative home funds, but that's really not germane to our discussion today. Next slide, please. So affordable housing criteria and citing. GLO does a very thorough review of any project that we put forward for approval. We go through what's called an affirmatively furthering fair housing review. That has to be cleared through GLO. Minority concentrations are an issue that's reviewed. Poverty concentrations, crime. We had a project that we put forward for approval to GLO, and actually they denied it, and we had to relocate that project to another area that did not have the particular crime or poverty concentration. So it is a very significant aspect as well. Also, our site and neighborhood characteristics. The positives are strong siting that has strong amenities, retail, health, job centers, parks. Also, the disamenities or the negative siting. We don't want projects located near industrial uses, salvage yards, landfills, water treatment plants, anything that would be considered a negative land use. And all of these are factors that are reviewed on threshold, and also are factors that are reviewed with GLO. And so it's very critical that any request for application / proposal that's submitted to us really takes into consideration the type of project that's being proposed and the location of that project. Next slide, please. So this is what we call our opportunity area map, and then also our concerted revitalization area map. The areas in maroon would be considered higher opportunity areas. Ideally, you would have a project located in one of these communities. On the other side of the coin, which is concerted revitalization areas, Harris County Community Services Department has made long-term investments in communities, and so with that, consideration would be made into those projects. What's the difference in a project being proposed, and how would it fit with respect to the long-term revitalization of a community, and be able to demonstrate one, alternative, which is high opportunity, versus the other, which is in these concerted realization areas. Next slide, please. So CHODOs. We talk about CHODOs and the concept of home. For this particular exercise, we really won't be focusing on home itself as an investment fund. We do have some information in the application related to, are you a CHODO or not? It's a little bit of a hybrid from a 501c3 in the sense of its board composition. Next slide, please. So leveraging funds. What is it that the development entity is bringing to the table relative to the overall project funding? Our funding would not be 100% of the project. So essentially, being able to demonstrate that you have those funds in place and that you have the overall project funding in place to undertake the project and meet our reimbursement requirements is really the essence of what we have here. Next slide, please. So special requirements. Again, we've talked about the readiness of the project, being able to meet the Section 504 requirements. That's the mobility and sensory impaired units. We also ask for additional units above and beyond that, as demonstrated here. Also, we require a minimum of 5 units being set aside for supportive housing. We've had success with our earlier round of projects in embedding supportive housing units into these projects. And what we'd want to see there then is, by virtue of having these units, then being able to partner with the various housing authorities that would have vouchers that would be brought to bear in order of these particular units. Normally, these units are set aside for someone that has an income of 30% of median or below. Also, the rent requirements are at 80% of median or below. And also, we want to make sure that everyone fully understands that we have a assisted unit topping out at what we call high home rent. It is not some hybrid variation from TDHCA. It is high home rent, low home rent, and also we have a hybrid on that called a low home. That's 60% of low home. So just please be very mindful of that. We've reviewed projects in the past, and we've noticed that they were not using the correct rent requirements for restricted units. Next slide, please. So we will be staffing these projects as we make determination on awards, and then those projects would go through the environmental review. First, they would go through the threshold. Excuse me? Did someone have a question? I mean, we'll get into questions shortly if someone does have a question. So we will go through the various agreement phase. They have to go to Commissioner's Court for approval. Then there will be orientation. Also, projects have to meet housing quality standards inspections. As the project goes through and finishes construction, we would assure that any project, any unit that is built meets these requirements associated with that. Next slide, please. Fair housing. Fair housing is a very important issue. I just noticed that my mic was off, but we build in fair housing requirements into our agreements, and it's very important that anyone that we contract with adhere very closely to the HUD fair housing requirements. Next slide, please. Okay, so housing discrimination, and essentially this is also associated with fair housing, and it's refusal to make accommodations. Also, we build into the agreements that all properties must accept housing choice vouchers associated with this, and it's a requirement that also is placed on us by GLO. Next slide, please. So filing a complaint with related to fair housing is, and here's some various links associated with that. Next slide, please. Okay, equal access to housing. And this is associated with sexual orientation and gender identity. And this is something that came into play back in 2012. So again, these are aspects that we covered during this presentation, but then also we built into the loan agreements that we put into place. Next slide, please. Again, more information regarding equal access and the requirements associated with that. Next slide, please. Okay, violence against women, otherwise known as VAWA, we include in our requirements as well. Just really the whole dimension of fair housing and discrimination that we address through our federal funding. Next slide, please. Contractor procurement. This is something that we've gone through pretty significantly. So we look at a nonprofit as a subrecipient, and the nonprofit would have to assure that it adheres to the requirements that we are putting in place on that nonprofit. Also, we have had for-profit entities that have introduced nonprofit conduit structures. We want to assure that there is competition associated to the program, and essentially that's one of the reasons that we want to assure that there's some form of open competition. You have subcontractor trades, you have Section 3 requirements as well. And so all of that combined is essentially creating a level playing field. We work pretty significantly with the Harris County Housing Authority, and they've been very successful in terms of how they bring to bear the contractor opportunities into these projects. And then also the earlier round of funding and how the contractor opportunities were brought to bear into those projects, and assuring that there's some form of open competition relative to this. Next slide, please. HUD Section 3. I'm gonna now pause and see if anyone from the Department of Economic Equity and Opportunities on to talk about HUD Section 3.
Sure, Renee. This is Gary Greer. I'm the Senior Program Manager for the Department of Economic Equity and Opportunity. This is a project, because of the funding, is federally funded. It'll be covered under HUD Section 3 and the final new rule that was implemented last year. All projects in excess of $200,000 for housing construction, demo, rehabilitation, or public construction are obligated to comply with the requirement of Section 3, which is really to the greatest extent feasible target investment in lower income neighborhoods and workers. Next slide, please. And then we've provided to you some information along with the HUD portal that has a listing of Section 3 businesses that have been certified or that are holding themselves out to be what's called a Section 3 business, which provides opportunities for a large amount of low-income workers, and then they each will be what we call a targeted worker, and we'll see that on the next slide. Next slide, please. So these are the benchmarks, the current benchmarks for each project under Section 3. Basically, 25% of the total labor hours worked by the project are worked by Section 3 workers, and that can be an employee of a Section 3 business, a youth field participant, or someone below 80% AMI. And so the income limit for our service delivery area is $49,600, which is a substantial amount. Benchmark for targeted Section 3 workers are employees of a Section 3 business in a youth field participant or service area resident. So we'll need to be mindful about that, because the service area resident is only those low-income workers that are within that live within a 1 mile 1 mile of the seated of the project, of where the project is located. Your Section 3 team, my team, will be providing technical assistance and outreach and help make sure that we reach these goals. If the goals are not met, then you don't reach what's called safe harbor with HUD, and we have to demonstrate all the qualitative efforts that were used by both contractor, subrecipient, Harris County, and subcontractors to reach these goals. I think that's the last slide. Next slide, please. All right, thank you, Renee.
So in terms of MWBE, the county has now put in place an MWBE requirement. As far as how I understand that to work, and is Ernie Hernandez on, or is anyone on that can speak to MWBE? We're not going through the purchasing department on this funding round. I don't know that the MWBE associated with DEEO is be put in place on this project, but I don't want to speak out of turn on that. So if no one from DEO is here to speak of this, well, we'll provide more information on this particular slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so I will pause, and someone, if they can please, from DEO, speak on DBRA.
Hi, Renee. Hi, everyone. This is Maria Rodriguez. I am the Senior Program DBRA Manager for Harris County Department of Economic Equity and Opportunity. Davis-Bacon requires all contractors and subcontractors performing work on fairly funded projects in excess of $2,000 to pay their laborers and mechanics, not less than the prevailing wages and fringe benefits. Employers must be paid according to the wage decision. You'll also be required to have a project signed, and there will be required DBRA compliance postings that will also be required. Employees must be paid at or above the wage decision that will be provided in both the bid specs and the pre-constructions. The equal employment opportunity is the law, and the employee's right under the Davis-Bacon must be posted through the duration of the project, both in English and in Spanish. We also utilize a software called LCP Tracker, where the general contractor and all the subcontractor, lower tier subcontractors will utilize to submit documentation electronically versus hard copy. We also, all the contractors must submit weekly certified pay reports electronically. We also do random field interviews. On-site monitoring compliance. Please keep in mind, federal regulation requires Harris County to monitor your compliance with federal labor standards. The county uses a variety of means to ensure compliance. We interview employees at the job site. We take written statements from the employees. We document their observation. We review and examine their certified payroll reports. And we also examine records relating to their fringe benefits, apprentices, and trainings, along with contracts and time logs. Do we have any questions with DBRA? Also, we did provide technical assistance to ensure that everyone understands the compliance and rules and regulations of Davis-Bacon. Thank you, Renee.
Yeah, thank you. I did see some questions in the chat and dropped some notes there. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so a little bit about our scoring. We have 105 total points. I know a number of you on the call have strong familiarity with CSD. Organizational capacity is important. Project information. The the compliance, financial information, financial stability, and ability to fund a project are extraordinarily important. And so all in all, this is what leads to these 105 points. There's a financial threshold review that's undertaken with every project. We also review it relative the thresholds, and those projects that do make it above the thresholds and then would be continued on for scoring as well. Next slide, please. So I know this page is a little hard to read, but we'll update this as well and send out the final, and we'll send out the slides as well. Our funding currently is only $13.5 million, and it does not include any other funding source. Apologize, I just now saw that that hadn't been updated. So again, I mean, just to close, I mean, we are looking for projects that are investment ready and can proceed with respect to the timelines that we have, and be able to deploy and expend, and us be reimbursed by GLO for the funding that we're reimbursing. Any reimbursements we make are being made through general funds, and so it is extremely important that we are in a position to be able to receive reimbursement from GLO. Next slide, please. So again, a little bit of the quick reference, and all of this is incorporated in the electronic RFA. Next slide, please. Again, a little bit about the checklist and being able to look at this. Do you have plans that have been reviewed and can meet cost reasonableness? We also undertake independent cost estimates as well of plans. You know, various attachments that you have to attest to, and I'm sure that many of you are familiar with this particular document. Next slide, please. Again, important to ensure that everything is filled out and it is accurate. Next slide, please. So we also include in here what we call the construction management services, and we also build in an amount to cover the other contractors that we have in place that do third-party support in terms of cost estimates, also change order analysis, the DBRA and Section 3 reviews that occurs, also third-party support for our own architect and construction management staff. Next slide, please. A little bit more about the document and tying back to Harvey and being able to demonstrate that linkage. Next slide, please. Okay, the anti-discrimination policy and other kinds of certification, various requests associated with complying with various federal requirements as well. Next slide, please. Okay, the leverage and working capital. When we undertake our reviews, we have to determine that an organization has working capital. So bank statements, ability to demonstrate that they have the ability to essentially carry a project until reimbursements occur. Next slide, please. So I don't know that any project is being submitted that would have tax credits, but being able to demonstrate site control, being able to indicate to us that a project has the readiness that we're seeking in order to proceed. Also telling us what is it that you're seeking to do. Acquisition rehab, is it new construction? Everything associated with what is it that you're planning to do. Next slide, please. Also, the environmental requirements, I can't stress enough that every one of these projects has to go through a very detailed environmental review with GLO and with our own staff, and being able to obtain that information, being able to process it in a way that can really be an expeditious review by GLO is very important. We don't we really can't engage in projects that have like floodplain issues, that have some form of siting issue that would not make it through the environmental process. So all of these are that. We can't have any choice limiting actions as well, and that's associated with if there is a proposal for acquisition. It's like, well, what's the entity we're going into? You can't close on something before there is environmental approval through GLO, and we get that authority to use grant funds. Next slide, please. Also, who are the development entities that we're working with? The entire development team, and listing those out. Next slide, please. So this is your mix. What kind of assisted units you're proposing, your total units. We are very HUD home centric. So that's why we use the term HUD high home rent, low home rent, and then we also use low home rent. It's important that you look at the tables that we provide relative to rent, and those rents cannot exceed those limits that are established. Next slide, please. So supportive services. Also, we talk about qualified elderly developments, and if it is elderly, what are the services that are going to be provided? As far as the affirmatively furthering fair housing review that GLO undertakes, they look at this very closely, and in fact, we have to build into our loan agreements these requirements that before the project is opened, that what was stated is going to happen will happen. The fencing, sidewalks, lighting, anything related to security, the services that are being provided and proposed. Let's just say if it was a senior housing project. Next slide, please. So on this particular slide, how many units are we doing? Is it going to be Energy Star? Is it going to be something else? All of these are requirements that we have. In fact, there's a third-party reviewer for Energy Star. We have to have that certification. Also on the ADA side, there's a third-party reviewer that would be required. Any kind of mitigation that's here, that's stated. Next slide, please. So what's your schedule? It's very, very important for us to understand expenditures. If it is, let's say, an acquisition, when would it occur? If it's an acquisition or new construction, when would it occur, and the timing for that? Just bear in mind that we have to see completion by the summer of 2024. To get there, that means that we have to have, and our loan agreement stipulates this, expenditures drawn every month. Next slide, please. I think, was this the same slide, or do we have another? Okay, great. Okay, supportive housing set aside. Here we have a table on what that looks like, and there's points associated with that. Now, also in terms of the supportive housing, really that's what relationships do you have, and we also have the coordinated access system. So with that, let's say that you do set aside 5 units. Well, we would work with coordinated access to identify potential tenants that could access those units, and it would have to be the appropriate fit. There would be some form of voucher that has to be brought to bear with that. Also, then the ADA units and the additional threshold that's there in order to seek more points. The nexus to Harvey damage, what was that? you know, a lot of times we see that we're responding to the loss of units associated with Harvey, and we've had a major housing crisis from 2017 because of the loss of units, but then also the population growth that's occurred that has put a constraint on units, and then rising rents as well. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the table that we use. This is a roll up from this is okay. So we're looking. We may have additional funding that's bringing to bear on this program, but for right now, and we'll send out a clarification on that. As far as the budget, we do require a breakdown of sources and uses. We do require a very detailed breakdown of costs as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is our standard development cost table. We would include the units. As I said, the rents are very important, that we don't want to overstate rents. And then also our costs, and then the unit size breakdown that's on this table. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the pro forma. So being able to document your expenses, and we would review these expenses and determine the thresholds, and we'd go through subsidy layering analysis on this as well. Next slide, please. Okay, the rent schedule. So the types of rents, the unit size, etc. Next slide, please. Okay, helpful tips. Okay, do you have a SAMS number, a DUNS number? So that's very important. Also, start early. Double check your numbers for accuracy. Make sure that your budget is correct. And then I think all of y'all have heard a number of these. No late applications. Next slide, please. Technical assistance ends on the 14th. And then our application deadline is October the 20th at 2 p.m. Is this the last slide, Jennifer? Okay. And then you've heard me say the name Jennifer. So also questions could be directed to our affordable housing rental housing manager, and then also visiting our website. With that, we'll open it up for questions. Does anyone have any questions?
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I just wanted to confirm things. So no properties are going to be funded within the city of Houston unless you are part of a homeless program?
You would have to demonstrate that there's other funding from another jurisdiction. So we are focusing on our geography, which is outside the city of Houston and in the 33 other cities.
You said we need to demonstrate.
Well, I mean, I don't know where the city of Houston is relative to their funding, if they're making any more funding available. But normally we work in concert with the city of Houston on jointly funded projects related to homelessness. And unless that is demonstrated, that's really not our focus right now.
Okay, thank you.
So, Renee, as a follow-up to that question, if I know that you're not looking at projects within the city limits unless they're homeless projects, and you have a desire for city funding along with that, will you consider a good shovel-ready homeless project? And I put this in the same question in the chat, that doesn't have city funding, for one, and because the amount of time between now and October 20th that this application is due is a really short time period to secure city funding. So I guess the question is it possible you would consider a homeless project without city funding within the city limits?
Neil,
Or
Neil, we would have to look at our criteria, but GLO would have to give us that kind of approval. And so it's not just as easy as saying we'll consider it. It's something that we'd have to go through. You know, that's why we're talking about the focus being primarily outside the city of Houston, outside the city limits of Houston.
okay, so that's the focus, but it's not an absolute prohibition.
GLO would have to give us that approval. So it's not something that we can just absolutely say. I think it would complicate it, frankly. But I mean, it is something that we'd have to go through that process.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Hi, Renee, Eva Thibodeau here. Question about the vouchers that would be used for any supportive housing units. Do those agreements with the Housing Authority of Jurisdiction need to be secured and presented with the application, or is that something that would happen post-application?
Even, I mean, you raise an interesting point. It's like, how are you demonstrating the feasibility of a project? Let's just say that you are looking at a predominantly homeless project. Obviously, they have to come with vouchers. Can you demonstrate that you've secured vouchers into a project? We worked with a jointly funded project that brought into it project-based vouchers, and in fact they were working with the Houston Housing Authority on that, and that was part of their financial feasibility that was demonstrated. So it's all about, you know, the financial feasibility of being able to get a project in place that's predicated on vouchers. I think we'd have to, you know, do a timeout on this and probably get more information because I mean clearly the vouchers are being used to support the feasibility of the project. So what's the plan? You know, how real is it?
That makes sense. And again, as Neil Ratcliffe had stated, just given the tight turnaround, you know, getting those kinds of commitments, you know, upfront could be a challenge for certain projects. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to deploy our some remaining funding, and I realize it's a shorter time. It's a short turnaround. We did not, frankly, have success with a round 3. We had projects that simply didn't meet our financial thresholds, and so we're and also we've reduced our funding and stripped out anything related to entitlement funding. But we are seeking projects that can proceed quickly so that we can invest and then start being able to draw again through GLO. That's really an overriding objective for us, is to be able to deploy funds and to be able to expend the funds that we have and meet our expenditure requirements.
Renee, may I jump in with something real quick?
Sure.
As of today, just a few hours ago, there is a possibility that and we'll be issuing an addendum to this RFA, that Harris County may have access to an additional $100 million in CDBG DR funding. I'm letting this body know first that we are going to issue an addendum with more information that will also be put back into the newspaper for full publication for full, so we can let everybody know. So okay. Just put that on everyone's radar that is something that is coming right off the presses, hot now. And we will discuss what the jurisdictional boundaries will be and requirements for any kind of geolocating within the city, out the city. We'll go ahead and have that conversation with GLO for those additional. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Chrissy, I appreciate that. I saw that in the chat, and that was like, that was pretty that was pretty transformative. But we understand the issue around timing, and we're cognizant of that. It's just that right now we have an August of 2024 deadline to expend our funds, and absent any change in that, new construction projects have really had a very slow cadence. We say 18 months of construction, and we have not seen that for various reasons. So that's why we kind of predicated some things on some things that were an easier expenditure threshold. But well, yeah, Chrissy, that's great news, and we certainly need to, circle back and set the position and expectations on that. So any other questions at this point?
Renee, hey, it's JB. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Hi, JB. How are you?
Hey, quick question on the acquisition side, because you mentioned reimbursements a lot being needing to be a reimbursable, but on the acquisition side, I'm assuming that you mean portions of the fund can be used for acquisitions and then portions for rehab. How would that flow?
Well, in both cases, let's just say it was an acquisition rehab, and so on the land, we would need somebody to fund, and then we would reimburse. On rehab, there has to be a funding source to fund construction, and then we reimburse. It's very similar to how we've engaged on our other 16 projects. We don't advance, and so that's the operative phrase there.
Okay, so even in an instance where you mentioned the land, that you can advance for land specific, or I'm just thinking some of these, the portion that's going towards acquisition is going to be larger than what our typical development deal would be. So just trying to think how that would flow to be able to close it in the first place.
Well, I mean, we have to have environmental clearance to close and an authority to use grant funds to close. But in order for us to fund an acquisition, we fund it through a reimbursement. Like, for example, and I'm reading on here, the best we could do is bring a check to closing. We've done that in some other instances with the Harris County Housing Authority. But we've had one project that's cited near downtown, and they probably had $6.2 million in land costs that had to be funded through PNC. But I think lay that out as a scenario or a question. But we just want to make sure that anyone that we engage in projects with have the financial capacity to undertake these projects, because we can't just fund construction directly, but acquisition, let's look at that maybe as another scenario. But
yeah, it sounds like it may be possible. We just have to go through the proper approvals first, and then it may be possible. Does that sound consistent?
Yeah, I would say lay that out, and what's the scenario, but we can get more clarity on this as well. Any other questions from anyone? And please feel free to send us questions, and we will respond as quickly as we can. And the team will huddle on this other funding as well. And then Eva, as far as vouchers, lay that out some and kind of noodle on how a project would cash flow, being predicated on vouchers and the certainty of that.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay. So barring no other questions, we appreciate everyone's time and interest and commitment to really furthering the affordable housing goals of Harris County. And with that, we appreciate everyone's time and look forward to you all, your interest in this program. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.